Hey, welcome to Anime What Ifs. This is part 24. What if Naruto married Temari? Temari's nose twitched as the scent of frying bacon drifted into the bedroom, dragging her from her slumber. Her eyes widened in alarm as her stretches told one of her babies that it was time to tap dance on her bladder. Rushing to the bathroom as fast as she could in her current plus size, her still sleepy brain registered that she didn't remember going to bed. Taking care of her morning routines and deciding she was just going to stick to her robe, she set off downstairs to verbally smack down her idiot husband for just taking off after he'd been placed in a damn coma. She grumpily made her way into the kitchen, but her mood melted away when she saw Naruto concentrated on making what seemed to be a breakfast tray for her. Before she could really think of anything, she found herself wrapped around his back and crying. Naruto was off in his own little world as he stared at the bacon, trying to will it into cooking faster. Until he found himself trapped in an unbreakable bear hug by a sobbing Temari. At that point he was focused more on trying to breathe and wondering what the hell was up with Temari. Waiting for her to loosen her grip a bit so he could at least turn around and hug her back, he couldn't help wondering if maybe he should have left a note or something. After a few minutes, Temari managed to clear some of her emotions, at least enough to loosen her grip, and she was pleasantly surprised when Naruto turned and held her. Reaching up against her now slight height advantage, he gently tugged her head down so that their foreheads touched. Locking her eyes on his, she could see both worry and affection in their depths. Closing her eyes, she relaxed in the warmth of his arms. "Temari-chan?" he asked in a low, concerned voice. "What's wrong?" She shook her head slightly, not breaking contact with him, and squeezed him tightly again. "I was really worried," she finally whispered. "When I looked outside last night, I thought you were dead." "Ah," Naruto replied, not having a better response. "Well, I can tell you about what happened, but how about I do it while you eat? I know you have to be hungry." Nodding, she reluctantly released him and moved to sit down at the table. She didn't take her eyes off of him while he finished making her breakfast, and he would occasionally pause what he was doing to give her reassuring smiles. It wasn't until after he'd brought the tray to her and set it out that she noticed the small creature sitting at the table watching her intently. Accustomed to the odd things that happened around her husband, she merely raised an eyebrow before beginning to eat. She figured Naruto would get around to explaining, and she really was hungry. Sitting down across from Temari, Naruto considered what to tell her before mentally shrugging and deciding that she might as well know everything. Taking his time to try to make sure he explained everything thoroughly, he noted that the longer he spoke, the more exasperated his wife became. "So," she said, toying with a piece of bacon, her appetite diminished by Naruto's story. "S-class missing Nin, who according to you is actually still loyal to his village, showed up last night and mind-raped you as a means of passing on a warning?" She palmed her face and muttered under her breath, before looking at him again. "Only you, Naruto, only you." "Hey, it's not like I try to have these sorts of things happen to me," he said defensively. "They just sort of, well, you know, do." "I know," Temari replied flatly. "Frankly, I'm just amazed at how diverse the trouble that finds you can be." "Head," Naruto said sheepishly, rubbing the back of his neck in his usual manner. "Well, I suppose that leads me to Fukasaku here. I guess that the toads want to train me for what's coming, but I really wanted to talk to you before I agreed to anything." Temari narrowed her eyes, looking between Naruto and Fukasaku. "I'm guessing there is more to it than training if you want to talk to me about it," she finally said. "Alright, lay it on me." "Well, apparently they can't fully train me until I get older, but they want to train me at Mount Mayaboku, and I don't know how long that will take. Naruto-kun here wanted to know if you wanted to come with." Fukasaku broke in when Naruto took too long to get to the point for his taste. "As a toad summoner, you would be welcome. The other option is that you remain behind and we summon Naruto-kun in the mornings and return him at night." Temari tapped her finger on the table as she considered the options. "Will there be something for me to do there?" Naruto shrugged and looked at Fukasaku, who was watching Temari carefully. "In your condition, not really," the elder toad finally replied. "There are perhaps a few jutsu you could learn, but you will never have the chakra reserves necessary for the training Naruto will be enduring." "I see," Temari sighed. As much as I would prefer to keep an eye on my knucklehead husband, I believe I must refuse your offer for now, Fukasaku-sama. She rubbed her stomach with a small smile. In the future, I reserve the right to change my mind, of course. I look forward to it, Fukasaku replied with a smile and a small bow. You have a good one here, Naruto-kun, I like her. Naruto's smile lit up the room. Yeah, Temari-chan's pretty awesome, he agreed happily. Totally makes up for the whole married against my will thing. The sound of chopsticks snapping drew both Naruto and Fukasaku's attention to Temari, who was glaring murder at her husband. Suddenly finding it a great time to leave, the toad turned to Naruto hastily. Well, it will take a bit to get things ready for you, Naruto-kun. Bye now. Watching the old toad dispel himself in a poof of smoke, Naruto flinched when he peeked over at a steaming Temari. That came out sounding worse than I meant, he said, inching towards the door. I'm very happy to be married to such a beautiful, kind and loving kunoichi like you. Growling, Temari got up from the table and stalked across the room at him. Closing in on him, she noticed him gulp and prepared to bolt before she broke out in a wide smile. We both know that it was me how was married against their will, she said sweetly while patting his cheek. Right? Naruto hastily nodded his agreement and let Temari lead him back to the table, rather confused by the emotional whiplash. So, I've been thinking lately, Temari said after sitting Naruto down and taking her own seat. We had a really bad week recently, and it was mostly because we had a problem communicating. After the mission, why didn't you talk to me, or even on the way home? I was waiting for you to come to bed on the trip back so I could talk to you, but you stayed away and it frustrated me. Naruto scratched his face nervously. Well, you seemed really mad whenever I looked at you, Temari-chan, and I didn't want to make you even more angry with me. I was hoping that you'd cool down by the time we got back so that I could talk to you. Temari sighed and massaged her temples. Yeah, I figured that out afterwards, but I don't really want to go through something like that again. She looked up and gave him a lopsided smile. I came to a realization last night on the Hokage monument that I've actually fallen in love with you. Naruto froze up in shock at the words. An old pain flared up within him before being doused by the words Temari had just spoken. Words he'd longed to hear his entire life but had worried he never would. He'd known that she cared and even liked him, and he'd been content with that given the arranged marriage thing, but for her to tell him that she loved him was simply amazing. It did lead into the problem of what to say. He certainly liked Temari and she was his most precious person, but he didn't know if he loved her. He really didn't know how love felt and he didn't want to lie, but she looked like she was expecting a response. What was he supposed to say? Temari smiled at her husband and reached across the table to hold his hand. Sish, I know what you're thinking, she said softly. I know that you deeply care about me, but I won't force you to say you love me until you know it for yourself. Getting up, but still holding his hand, she moved around the table to sit across his lap. Leaning forward, she gave him a gentle kiss on the lips before running her free hand softly along the curve of his jaw. I think that I know you better than anyone now, she whispered with a grin. I can't wait for the day you can tell me that back. Naruto relaxed as he understood that she not only didn't expect him to parrot her words back, but also that she understood why. He found himself smiling as an idea of how to repay her came to mind. Gently pushing her off his lap, causing a cute pout, he bowed over her hand. My sand princess, may I have the honor of this dance? Temari's eyes widened a bit in shock before she laughed happily as she understood his actions. While she liked dancing, Naruto hated it. He might not know how to respond fully to her confession, but the willingness to do something he disliked was telling on its own. Even with his recent growth, Naruto couldn't hold her past her expanded stomach, so he slipped in behind her and wrapped his arms under hers. Her relaxed posture, combined with his new height, allowed him to rest his chin on her shoulder as he slowly led her in a simple shuffle. The sensation of being held, combined with the slow movement, relaxed Temari until her husband began gently rubbing along the underside of her bust. What are you doing?" she murmured. Naruto's hand froze, then continued the gentle massage. "Nothing much," he said. "I was just wondering if these stayed the same size after your pregnancy." Temari snorted and rolled her eyes. Way to kill the mood, Baka. I would hit you for that dumbass comment, but this feels good. Continue or we find out if your arm is edible. Naruto chuckled. Ma, so violent. You're lucky you're so beautiful. Temari pinched his arm in response to that comment. Beautiful? Ha, I'm a bloated monster right now, and it's all your fault. Next time, I'm having Tsunade-sama figuring out a way for you to carry the baby. Naruto froze for a moment at the mental image of himself with an extended stomach. Nah, I think I'll pass, he replied. You're still beautiful, though I will admit that the mood swings scare the hell out of me. Temari snickered. Can't help it, but that does remind me, I got a bit off track earlier. If I'm angry with you, you have to talk to me, or the reverse is true as well. I really don't want something like the past week happening again. Yeah, it really sucked, Naruto agreed. I promise I'll try, but you are one scary woman when you're angry, you know. Temari chuckled low in her throat. Well, someone has to keep you in line, she replied huskily as Naruto's hands continued their work. Are you planning something with this? She whispered. 'Cause I don't want you to start something that you aren't going to finish. Naruto traced a line of kisses along her neck. Well, I don't really have anything planned, how about you? Temari growled and grabbed his hand, pulling him towards the stairs. As a matter of fact, I do have something planned, she said, dragging her bemused husband along. You're gonna finish what you just started, husband. Naruto chuckled as Temari dragged him upstairs. Ah, the trials of marriage, he commented lightly. Oh, you're going to pay for that one, Naruto. An hour or so later, a happy Temari sat at the kitchen table sipping her tea as she watched Naruto rub some healing cream into his new wounds. Serves him right, she thought, her grin hidden by the cup. Ow, Naruto said dryly as he inspected damage. I'm considering registering those nails of yours as lethal weapons. Rubbing some of the cream into a bite, he gave Temari an annoyed look. Was it really necessary to bite that hard? Temari smirked at her husband. Yes it was. I told you that you would pay for that last comment. Naruto pouted. I was just joking. Temari's smirk widened. Sometimes jokes come with a cost, husband. Doesn't mean you needed to claw and bite me half to death, he retorted lightly. Yes I did, she said with a bright laugh. She eyed his shirtless body with a gleam in her eye and shifted her robe open to show him some cleavage. You know, I could always kiss it better, she said suggestively. Naruto stared at her and absently wiped a bit of drool away. As tempting as that is, he said with some regret. I suspect someone will come bug us sometime soon. When Temari raised an eyebrow in question, Naruto sighed. Name the last time we had a whole day to ourselves. Temari thought it over and was forced to admit he had a point. Someone always seemed to drop by. At second thought, she was surprised they hadn't been interrupted earlier. Before she could say anything about it, she heard the front door open and Naruto gave her an I told you so look. Kicking off her sandals at the door, Sakura wondered if she would still be welcome after the fight with Temari the night before. She'd said some mean things, she didn't really regret anything she'd said, but they were still mean. Taking a deep breath, she gathered her courage and headed into the house only to freeze and blush heavily when she found Naruto shirtless in the kitchen. Wow, she thought. Who knew he was hiding that under those jackets of his? Taking a closer look, she saw his back was heavily scratched up and he had what looked like bite marks as well. Holy hell, what did Temari do to him? Her blush deepened into bright crimson when she put Temari's smug expression together with Naruto's injuries. With his healing, those had to be extremely fresh and she was suddenly glad she hadn't gotten home sooner. Sakura-chan. Hey Sakura-chan. Naruto snapped his fingers in front of Sakura's face, finally getting her attention. Ah, you okay? He asked when her eyes finally focused on his face. You seem a bit under the weather. Temari snickered in the background and Sakura stifled a groan. She'd almost pulled a Hinata on him and clueless as he was, he'd reacted the same as he always did. Yeah, I'm alright, she managed to choke out. I just wasn't expecting to see you half undressed in the kitchen. Naruto blinked at her, then looked down. Oh, he said, a bit embarrassed. I sort of forgot to put on a shirt after I got done. He turned around quickly and caught the t-shirt Temari tossed to him, hurriedly pulling it on. Yeah, I had a bit of a run-in with a wildcat this morning. I got marked up, but I think I gave just as good as I got. Temari choked on her tea and Sakura felt her face flame up again at the innuendo in his statement. It boggled her mind that Naruto of all people was saying something like that. At least Temari was apparently just as shocked as she was. So, I'm surprised to see you coming home in the morning, Naruto said, ignoring the reactions from the women with practiced ease. I was halfway expecting to find you still asleep. Sakura shot a glance at Temari before responding. Well, last night I thought I'd hang out with Ino and it turned into a sleepover. Gotcha, he said with an easy grin. Hope you guys had fun. He looked around the kitchen and frowned. Now, if you ladies will excuse me, I need to find where I left my jacket. After Naruto wandered off, Sakura moved to the table and sat down across from Temari. She drummed her fingers on the table nervously as the older kunoichi eyed her carefully. After a minute or two of silence, Sakura sighed. Alright, I was out of line last night, she said quietly. I'm sorry for what I said, but I was really annoyed at how you were treating Naruto. Temari considered her cup carefully as she mentally debated her response. I suppose I accept your apology, she said finally. There were issues that got out of hand, and as much as it pains me to admit it, the shock value of what you did opened my eyes to what was going on. She narrowed her gaze on the other girl. That being said, I will tell you now that if you actually try what you threatened last night, they will never find your body. Sakura grimaced at the threat. She had no doubts that Temari was deadly serious, but she might relax some if Sakura explained what had driven her. I understand, she said gravely. There was more to it though, and I would like a chance to explain. Seeing Temari raise an eyebrow at her over her teacup, Sakura took that as permission to continue. I'm not in love with Naruto, she said quietly. I admit that I do have a little crush on him now, but that wasn't what drove me last night. Sakura looked up and met Temari's eyes squarely. There once was a girl, she said whimsically. This girl had a huge crush on the quiet, cool guy in her class, and she tried everything to get his attention. While she was trying to do that, there was a boy who was trying to get her attention, but she was mean to him because he annoyed her. The sad thing is that she built up her self-confidence with the knowledge that someone thought she was great but was unwilling to give the boy the time of day. Eventually, the girl ended up on a team with the cool boy she dreamed about and the boy who liked her. Lots of things happened, and the girl learned that the boy she thought she disliked was the only one that thought she was worth anything. He even risked his own life several times to save her, though she never thanked him for it. Temari eyed Sakura curiously. She wasn't sure where Sakura was going with her story. She knew it was the history of Team 7 obviously, but the why escaped her. So, after the boy saved the girl from a horrible death, the girl started liking the boy a lot more. Then they found out that the boy was to marry a beautiful princess and that he was in fact actually a prince himself. The girl took this hard. She'd begun to shift her attentions from the cool boy to the one that actually wanted her, but she knew there was nothing she could do. Then, the cool boy suddenly takes notice of the girl and offers marriage. The girl knew that it was in response to his rival being married, but even though the caring boy warned her, she accepted because she didn't want to let her childish crush go. The girl was treated horribly and could only watch in frustration as the princess became the object of the kind boy's affections. Every time he made her laugh or smile, it was a dagger in the girl's heart because she desperately wanted that for herself and wished her husband would show even a fraction of that warmth. Eventually, the girl was cast off as trash and abandoned by her husband and even her parents. Still, the kind boy was looking out for her, even though he was outside the village. His princess rescued the girl against her will because the boy would want her to. Sakura paused and poured herself some water. Taking a sip, she sighed and looked out the window as she continued her story. Eventually, the boy came home and forced the girl back to the land of the living. Even when she'd given She'd given up on herself, he still believed in her, and that spark gave the girl hope. Sakura licked her lips nervously before continuing. The girl realized that she owed everything to the boy and that she would do everything she could to repay that debt. Then, the boy was having trouble with the princess and the girl was furious that the princess was treating the boy badly. She decided that she was either going to get the princess to see reason or that she would take care of the boy herself, no matter the cost. The girl was delighted when the princess went to make up with the boy, but she was unsure of her own welcome after her dispute with the princess, so she left and went to a friend's to let things cool down. Temari calmly watched Sakura as she finished the story. Placing the cup down gently, she used her training to remain calm. If I'm understanding the story right, you're saying that you've more or less made yourself my husband's slave. Am I correct in this assumption? Sakura fidgeted and focused her eyes on her hands. Not how I'd like to describe it, but that's about right, she admitted quietly. Temari rubbed the bridge of her nose to quell her growing headache. You do realize that he would be absolutely pissed if you told him that, she hissed. It doesn't exactly fill me with joy either. He had that damn crush on you for so long and now you're stating that you would do whatever he wanted. Do you realize how screwed up that is? For that matter, if you feel like that, why the hell didn't you accept his offer to join the clan? Sakura shrugged uncomfortably but looked up from her hands to meet Temari's eyes. It was too soon, she said quietly. Naruto had just dragged me out of my own personal hell and then he just offered. It was just so fast, I couldn't really process it at the time. It didn't take me long to decide, but I've been afraid to bring it up because I have this fear that if I do, he'll rescind the offer or that you wouldn't accept me. Temari groaned and ran both hands down her face in frustration. Tell me, she said softly. Why do you want to accept the offer? And I don't mean your little story from before. Tell me, why do you want to be an Uzumaki? I want a home, Sakura said quietly, meeting Temari's gaze evenly. I want a place where I will be accepted and welcomed and not tossed out like I was garbage. I know that I'm not one of your favorite people, but even so, you're at least civil and treat me like I'm a person. As for Naruto, well, you know how he is. I can't say that I'm comfortable with all of this, Temari admitted. I have some serious issues with you deciding that you need to serve my husband, but I don't think I have the heart to deny you a home. If I did, I'd be just like those bastards that ignored or belittled both my brother and my husband, and I don't want to be anything like them. Sakura gave Temari a tepid smile. I suspect it will be uncomfortable for both of us. As for last night, I know that he is yours, she said. I will not make advances towards him, but if he decides that he wants me, I won't stop him either. Why the hell should I accept that? Temari snarled. How hard is it to understand that he is mine? Sakura held her hand up in a warning gesture and waited for Temari to calm down some. First, I know that he is yours. I honestly don't expect him to make a move on me, but I felt that it was best to be upfront, especially after the conversation from last night. The second reason is something Tsunade-sama brought up with me. Seeing that she now had Temari's undivided attention, Sakura continued. Tsunade-sama told me that Naruto was going to have to train to use the Kyuubi's power sometime in the near future. When he does, Tsunade-sama believes that he may become more driven by his instincts under its influence. And the reason that I couldn't take care of this myself? Temari asked in confusion. Tsunade-sama believes that if Naruto, mates with a woman while influenced by the Kyuubi's chakra, that there is a chance it will sterilize the woman in question. Sakura crossed her arms protectively and refused to meet Temari's eyes. Temari's eyes widened in shock and she just stared at Sakura for a moment. You can't be serious, she finally managed to sputter out. Why the hell would she tell you that and not me? Sakura sighed in resignation. It's a bit more complicated than that, but I was only asked about this after you guys left on the trip to Suna. Tsunade-sama said that no one really knows what will happen when Naruto starts training with the Kyuubi's chakra. Konoha has never trained the Kyuubi Jinchuriki and Naruto's seal was powered by the damn Shinigami. Add in Naruto's general unpredictability and no one knows what to expect. Taking a sip of her tea as she marshaled her thoughts, Temari felt a great deal of irritation, though not really directed at the pink one. Shoving thoughts of strangling a certain twin-tailed blonde to the back of her mind, she focused her attention back onto the conversation. Alright, what I don't get is why Tsunade-sama thinks Naruto of all people would turn all lusty. Kakashi and Jiraiya, Sakura coughed. Point, Temari said, rolling her eyes. Still, what makes the Hokage think that the Kyuubi's chakra would affect him like that? It doesn't really make much sense, and I sure as hell never got that sort of reaction from my brother. Sakura tapped her finger on the table as she dredged up the entire conversation with Tsunade. Well, she said something about the Inuzuka clan sometimes having issues with the bonds between the human and canine members of the clan. Apparently, if the personalities merge too much, the human member becomes more aggressive in all manners. Okay, Temari replied slowly. So, Tsunade-sama believes that might happen to Naruto, and if it does, it might sterilize any kunoichi he mates with? If true, it sounds like it would be better for him to train without a kunoichi nearby. Ano, Sakura said nervously. I get the feeling that she would prefer that he did become lustful as opposed to destructive, and it's worse than I might have implied. It gets worse? Well, the Kyuubi's chakra is incredibly dangerous and corrosive, Sakura answered. There is a good chance that if he mates with a kunoichi while using what Tsunade-sama called a chakra shroud, it will kill the kunoichi. Well, that certainly doesn't sound like a good plan, Temari replied dryly. You still volunteered for this though? Sakura shrugged dismissively. Well, I'm hoping that it's not necessary, but better me than someone more valuable like you, right? Sakura pulled out the scroll she'd received on Uzumaki adoption practices and waved it at Temari. Besides, I've got a plan. Temari massaged her temples wearily. Damn it, Pinky, even if I don't really like you much, viewing yourself as expendable is a bit much. Temari paused and gazed at Sakura speculatively. I suppose as matriarch, I should be approving of your willingness to sacrifice yourself for my husband, but I think we both know that he would not like that at all. She rubbed her stomach protectively. I suppose that you also have a point that I can't risk myself, so tell me this plan of yours. Sakura unrolled the scroll to a marked spot and handed it over. She noticed Temari's face paling as she read and braced herself for the upcoming fireworks. Temari slowly rolled up the scroll and bounced it on her hand a few times as she considered the girl sitting across the table. Your plan is dangerous as hell, she remarked mildly. Still, it probably does provide you with your best chance of survival should the worst happen. Assuming, of course, that you survive this first part. Sakura blinked. She'd been expecting a far more volatile response. Wait, you approve? She blurted out. I was expecting you to be angry or something, she backtracked hastily. Temari snickered at the flustered girl. Well, it's not the dumbest idea I've ever seen, mostly because I live with, my husband. Still, are you sure? This is dangerous as hell, and if it works, there is no going back. Sakura met Temari's gaze evenly. I have faith in my teammate, and Tsunade-sama is the best mednin that ever lived. I choose to believe that with both involved, this will work. I suppose you're right, Temari mused. It will take Naruto a bit to study up on the required seals, so this won't be happening anytime soon. You have until then to back out, and I won't hold it against you. Sakura smiled serenely at Temari. I won't, she said firmly. This is far from what I pictured when I was younger, but this is my choice and I won't change my mind. A silence settled on the girls as Temari continued to sip her tea and nibble on some of the snacks Naruto had left for her. Sakura busied herself making a lunch for herself before sitting across from Temari with a cup of coffee. Hey Temari, Sakura said, breaking the silence. I thought he just went to find his jacket, it shouldn't take this long, right? Temari rolled her eyes in exasperation. He probably got distracted by something shiny, she said with a smirk. Don't look at me like that, it happens. We'll be walking along and he'll get this goofy grin and then weird stuff happens. He's like a magnet for the bizarre. Sakura laughed as she remembered some of the things that happened to Team 7. Yeah, I know what you mean. We had a deer rank once, walking the Inazuka dogs, and somehow Naruto ended up in a minefield. Kakashi-sensei even said, "Only you Naruto," when it happened. Bouncing into the kitchen, Naruto was surprised to find the two laughing but shrugged it off and clapped his hands together excitedly. "So, who's up for some training?" he cheered. Sakura got up from her place at the table and apologized. "Sorry Naruto, I have a training class at the hospital in about half an hour." "Maybe tomorrow?" Naruto nodded at that. "Sure thing Sakura-chan. I've heard really good things from Ba-chan about your abilities with the medical stuff." "I always knew you'd find something you'd be great at," he said with a proud smile. Sakura blushed at the praise and hurriedly finished cleaning up after her lunch. "Thanks Naruto," she said. "Well, I'm off, you two have fun." Watching her leave, the smile dropped from Naruto's face and he sat down across from Temari. "So," he said. Temari gave him a slight smile. "How much did you hear?" she asked. "Pretty much all of it," he admitted. "I figured I'd stay out of it though." Temari pursed her lips in thought. Probably a good choice all things considered. I doubt she would have been as honest if you were here. Still, did you know anything about the whole bloodlust thing? Naruto shook his head. "Nah, probably just didn't get a chance. It's not like an S-rank shinobi kicked my ass first night back in the village." "Oh wait, that did happen." He paused and adopted a more serious tone. "I suspect that she probably would have told you eventually but not me. Especially since she seems to be just covering for possibilities. The few times I've used Fuzzbutt's chakra, I don't remember feeling particularly aroused. Filled with a desire to destroy everything, yes. Turned on, not so much." Temari shrugged in response. "I admit it seems unlikely. Still doesn't hurt to be careful even if the thought of you and Pinky together makes me want to stab both of you. I suppose you know what she wants you to do, right?" Naruto nodded glumly. "Yeah, the only reason I can use the Kyuubi's chakra without frying is that it also boosts my healing ability into something like regeneration. I've already got about a dozen clones studying the required seals for the adoption ritual." Temari considered that carefully. "I wonder if they can be used to transfer other bloodlines as well, something like the Byakugan or Sharingan." "I doubt it," Naruto said with a shake of his head. "The seals are designed to change the DNA of the recipient to carry the healing ability of the Uzumaki clan. As far as I can tell from the scrolls, the only reason it works is because when done correctly, the transferred healing ability repairs the damage done." "So what about transferring another bloodline to someone already carrying the healing ability?" Temari asked curiously. Naruto shuddered. "Well, I'm sure as hell not going to try it on myself or any of our family." He paused and eyed Temari curiously. "I suppose that includes Sakura-chan now then?" Temari snorted. "I suppose," she said reluctantly. "It beats having her try to convince me to take her as a sister wife, I guess." "I don't think she wants that, Temari-chan," Naruto said reprovingly. "I'm not happy that she seems to have based her life around being useful to me, but it beats her being strapped to a bed and suicidal, I guess. Still, I'm positive that she said she didn't want that." Temari closed her eyes and sighed. Baka. After pestering Temari in vain for why she'd called him an idiot, he dragged her outside to train. Ignoring her protests about being pregnant, he pointed out that she didn't have to do anything strenuous but fresh air and exercise were recommended for pregnant women. Realizing that he was both right and not going to drop the subject, she found herself slowly working through a taijutsu form Naruto showed her. "There you go Temari-chan," he cheered when she worked at an easy pace. "I know you're a long-range fighter, but you can't ignore being able to hand someone their ass with just your hands." Temari was willing to admit he had a point, but it was the reason her fan was backed with chakra-reinforced metal. Why hit someone with your fists when you could hit them with something much harder? Still, even burdened as she was, it was relaxing to get her body moving, though she tired out quickly and sat down to watch Naruto spar with his clones on the pond. It was somewhat odd to watch. She'd gotten used to him flowing gracefully through his forms, but today he was blurring into motion and losing his balance. "Naruto, what are you doing?" she asked after the third time he splashed face first into the pond. Leaving some clones to practice, he made his way over to her chair. "Well, I learned something fighting Itachi last night," he admitted. "I've always tried to hit as hard as I can, but I can add power to my strikes by increasing my speed. If I can get fast enough, I can hit someone without relying on tricks so much." "Oh, that makes sense, I suppose," Temari said after giving it some thought. "I'm not sure why you're having so much trouble though. You know the forms, how hard is it to speed them up?" "Meh, it's mostly muscle memory," Naruto replied. "It's hard to adjust when you just try to speed it up. Throws off all my reactions." He paused and rubbed the back of his head. "I'm considering trying to use chakra to enhance it, but I'm not sure how to do it without hurting myself." Temari stared at him blankly and resisted the urge to go hunt down Kakashi and force his precious book up his ass. "Naruto, one of the basic skills you should have learned after the academy was how to reinforce your body with chakra to move faster and strike harder. How the hell do you think I can swing my fan so easily?" "Oh," Naruto said, his expression dropping. "I didn't know that. I really didn't learn much other than tree climbing from Kakashi-sensei. He mostly tried to get us to work together as a team cause we sort of sucked at it." He looked at her hopefully. "Help me? Please?" Temari sighed and put her book down. "Alright, I'll help you out, but I don't want you to try anything I don't show you until you discuss it with me. Don't look at me like that, you have a tendency to overdo things and you know it. Now, the first thing you do is send a small, carefully controlled amount of chakra to your index finger. Now, move your finger and get a feel for how the chakra enhances the movement." She cut off at the sounds of the bones in Naruto's finger breaking. Healing the finger, she tried not to sigh again. With Naruto's massive chakra reserves, this was going to take a while, even with clones, and speaking of those. "Alright, how about we try using a clone so I don't have to keep healing you?" Once the required clone was in place, she continued the lesson. "Alright, let's try this again." It was early afternoon before Naruto managed more than just moving his hand without breaking it, but Temari was pleased with the progress. Naruto's usual training with the gravity seal had greatly strengthened him, add in chakra enhancement and he was going to be a nightmare to fight for just about anyone. "Alright, that's enough for now," she told him firmly. "It looks like we have a visitor, so take a break at least." Naruto nodded and bounded over to Metasuma as the Jonin leisurely made his way onto the training field. "Afternoon, Asuma-sensei," he called cheerfully. "Oh, hey Naruto." Temari, Asuma drawled around his usual cigarette. "Glad I caught you up and about. Figured I'd come talk to Temari about that little wind jutsu she used on me and Suna." Temari fought down a blush and hung her head. "Ah, yeah, sorry about that," she said. "I was upset, but I shouldn't have done that. You have my deepest apologies, Asuma-san, for my actions that day." Asuma lazily waved the apology off. "It was poor field discipline, but I'm not concerned about it. The circumstances aren't likely to happen again. What I'm interested in is how you did it. There are very few wind users here in Konoha, and I'm always looking to add to my repertoire." Temari smiled gratefully at the lazy Jonin. "Ah, I see. Well, it's not really a jutsu as such, just something I picked up to deal with people who close in on me. Naruto, lend me a clone for this." Once the clone was in position, Temari looked to make sure Asuma was watching. "So, what I came up with was sending a burst of wind chakra aimed at the ground using the person's chakra as a guide. Essentially, it surrounds the target's chakra and creates a huge gust of wind that blows them off their feet. If you have a hold and can throw them when it does, well, this is what happens." Grabbing the Naruto clone's arm, Temari proceeded to launch it a good 20 feet into the air. "So, normally, this is when I would use my fan to shred the target," Temari said with a smirk. Asuma watched intently and made to flick his cigarette until a low growl from Naruto made him reconsider. Field stripping it, he tucked the butt into a pocket, which made Naruto stop the intimidating growl. "That's pretty useful," he commented lightly. "Still, if they're that close, why not just hit them directly with the wind chakra?" Temari scowled in frustration. "I'm good at creating large amounts of wind and even sharpening it, but I don't want to do that if someone is that close. I prefer not to be shredded myself." Asuma pulled out one of his trench knives and channeled a wind blade around it. "Takes practice," he admitted. "Still, it's really useful for up close and personal." Naruto stared at the wind blade in awe. "That is so awesome," he cheered. "Can you teach me how to do that?" Asuma shrugged. "Gotta have a wind affinity to do it. I'm kinda bummed I can't pass it on to my students, because none of them do." "Cool. So, how do you find out your affinities?" Asuma stared at Naruto for a moment and shot a glance over at Temari when he heard her teeth grinding together. Taking a step away from the fuming pregnant hellbeast, he turned back to Naruto. "Well, ideally your Jonin-sensei should have tested you before entering you in the Chunin exam." "I'm guessing that didn't happen?" "No," Naruto pouted. "Kakashi-sensei is a kick-ass ninja, but he really kinda sucked as a teacher. I've only really started getting anything like help from him now that I'm a Chunin." Asuma sighed and pulled out another cigarette as he mused Kakashi's apparent inability to follow the guidelines for teaching genin. It didn't exactly come as a such, but it was still disappointing. "Well, the way we test for it here in Konoha is by using chakra paper. They're pretty pricey, so people don't usually carry them where I would test you." Naruto's eyes widened and he gave Asuma a wide grin and created a clone that ran off into the house while he did a little victory dance. Seeing the mystified looks he was getting from Asuma and Temari, he stopped and rubbed the back of his neck sheepishly. "Sorry, just excited," he said. "I'd been wondering what this box of blank paper in the study was for, and now I think I know." As he finished up explaining, the clone came back and handed him a small wooden box before dispelling. "Are these the right papers?" he asked Asuma as he showed the man the contents of the box. Asuma chuckled at the sight of almost an entire year's salary worth of chakra paper. "Yeah, those are what we need. Where did you get all of this anyway?" Naruto pulled out a piece of chakra paper and closed the box before handing to Temari. "I don't know," he admitted. "I found it in storage with my dad's things when I got the house. I've been wondering why a bunch of paper was in a sealed box, and now I know." Asuma briefly wondered what the yandere was using the paper for, but mentally shrugged it off and focused back on Naruto. "Alright, now hold the paper in your hand and channel some chakra into it." Temari interjected before Naruto could. "And by some chakra, he means a very small amount, Naruto. I'm not sure what happens if you overload chakra paper, and I would prefer not to find out." Naruto nodded at that and focused on channel as little chakra as possible into the slip of paper. He thought something was wrong when it tore itself apart, the edges smoking, but looking up, he noted the surprise on Asuma and Temari's faces. "Did I screw it up?" he asked apprehensively. Asuma shook his head. "Nope, it did what it was supposed to. The way it tore in half shows that you have a very strong wind affinity and the smoldering shows a weak fire one. I'm a bit surprised though. I don't think I've ever heard of a genin having a secondary affinity unless it was a Keki Genkai. Most jonin has a secondary, but it only forms after working with a second element quite a bit, and I don't think I've ever heard of you using much fire." "I don't," Naruto admitted. "I know one fire jutsu and I've only used it a few times outside of practicing with it." "Odd," Asuma commented. "Well, I can show you what to do to start training your wind affinity, and I'm sure Temari here can help you out as well." Picking up a leaf, he held it in the palm of his hand and shredded it with a pulse of chakra. "The first exercise is to cut a leaf in half with just wind chakra. When forming the chakra, imagine that it is sharp and getting sharper as you grind it against itself." Naruto picked up a leaf and focused on it, making a tiny nick as he visualized Asuma's words. "Okay, I think I get it," he said. I want to make it like I'm cutting the leaf from both sides, maybe like a pair of scissors? I always thought of it more as my knives cutting against each other, but I suppose scissors works, Asuma said. It's just important that you make it sharper. Naruto nodded and created a great many clones that all gathered leaves and began practicing. Seeing this, Asuma mentally grumbled about not getting Naruto assigned to his team after the academy. Wind affinity and mass shadow clones? Oh, the things he could have done with the kid, and instead Kakashi got him. He mentally sighed, sometimes life just wasn't fair. Well, I'm out of time for today, Asuma said, glancing at his watch. I'll drop by in a couple of days and see how you're doing. Waving a goodbye, Asuma wandered towards the complex entrance, bypassing an annoyed-looking Ino on his way out. He gave the girl a wave and quickened his steps. No way in hell was he going to deal with the blonde when she looked like that. Delegating the leaf exercise to his clones, Naruto sat behind Temari and massaged her shoulders. She'd complained about her back hurting, and since he was the one to drag her out to train, easing the pain seemed like the thing to do. Spotting Ino headed for them, Naruto cursed. Oh hell, she looks unhappy, Temari-chan. Temari opened her eyes and looked. Why yes, she does. What did you do? Because I don't think I did anything to piss her off. Sure, let's go with that, Naruto replied. I know she was pissed over the whole Suna thing, but I wasn't sure if she was pissed at me or at you. You, Temari said dryly. I always assume unless otherwise proven that it was you. Meh, so mean to me. All that biting and clawing, now this. Are you sure you aren't really a cat? Temari narrowed her eyes and held her nails up where Naruto could see them clearly. I don't know, she said sweetly. If I was, that would make you my scratching post, right? Naruto gulped. Hee hee, just kidding. Besides, other than Tora, I like cats. Temari reached back and patted his head. What do you know, she replied smugly. I'll have you housebroken in no time. Hey, Naruto pouted. I'm not an animal, I don't need housebroken. Temari chuckled evilly. Well, dear husband, it is the job of every wife to train their husband in the rules of the house, it's not just you. Well, that sucks, Naruto grumbled. I bet the teen doesn't have to deal with that. No, Temari agreed. Mostly 'cause he's an asshat. Naruto snickered. True enough. At that point, Ino arrived and planted herself in front of Naruto and Temari with a scowl on her face and her hands on her hips. Hey Ino-chan, Naruto said cheerfully. What brings you by today? I have a bet going with Temari-chan that it's probably something troublesome. Temari chuckled at the Shikamaru reference even as Ino rolled her eyes. Shopping. Ino said forcefully. Sorry, what? Naruto asked confused. I was promised a shopping trip with both of you before we left for Suna, Ino declared. I'm here to collect. Ah crap, Naruto muttered Sato voice to Temari. Temari for her part grabbed his arm painfully to disable his escape. You're not running away, she whispered back. If I have to deal with this, so do you. I don't suppose that I could convince Itachi to come back and put me back into a coma, Naruto replied. It might be less traumatic for me, he only killed me a couple hundred times. This might just burn my soul. Oh, quit being such a baby and go clean up. If you're not back in 10 minutes, we don't stop at Ichiraku afterwards. Naruto winced and hurried inside. She'd learned some truly horrible threats since she'd begun living with him. Still, he suddenly had a very sympathetic understanding of Shikamaru's viewpoint on women. They were indeed very troublesome. Hope you liked this episode, the next one is coming soon.